What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing the strange and mysterious I-40 dead zone. We've discussed so many times here on this channel places along the wide open road all across the world that just seem to attract weirdness and strange activity. Whether you refer to it as ley lines, the result of a thinner veil, or have no idea what it is, but only know that it's strange, I have come across yet another area in our great country of the United States that seems to have an above average ranking for seriously weird stuff going on. Of course, I'm talking about Florida and a short stretch of highway that's located there that seems to be almost like it's a sort of magnet that attracts strange and some say paranormal activity in, on, near, and around it. This place literally has a little bit of everything, but most notably for me is the fact that death is also alleged to haunt this specific and particular little swath of the country, and it's often referred to and somewhat well known as the dead zone. Is it haunted? Is it demonic? Is it cursed? Let's jump in and see what it all means, shall we? Believe it or not, Florida was once an underpopulated and very wild part of the United States, almost an untamed wilderness, if you will. However, once the late 1860s, early 1870s rolled around, Europeans were settling the area en masse. This helped the region to be built up very quickly, and before long, the natives of the area, of course, were displaced or sent to reservations. There's really no need for me to get into all of the tragic history here, but we already know what happened to those who wouldn't be pushed off the land outright or bought off with tiny plots of reservations, right? They were killed in battle with the European settlers. One example would be the Seminole Wars. Now, I've been wanting to start a history series on this channel for a really long time, but I'm still trying to find time in my schedule for other things like Anytime Oracle and things like that. But if you want me to cover some kind of haunted history, let me know and I'll set about it at some point, hopefully not too far off in the future. Anyway, the Seminole Wars is just one example of the slaughtering of the natives, but before long, the area we are talking about specifically, but also Florida in general, witnessed a massive surge in population when the Europeans realized how much land there really was that was unclaimed, as far as things go anyway. The place was uncharted, yet had numerous railroads and trading posts that kind of zigzagged and crisscrossed throughout this wilderness itself. This made it the perfect place to build up towns and cities, and it didn't take long for many to spring up all around these railroads and trading posts. As cities and towns popped up everywhere, the landscape itself was seemingly transformed due to the huge and major uptick in the population. One of the very first settlers in this area of the country was a man named Henry Sanford. In 1877, Henry bought up a bunch of land just north of what we know today as Orlando, and his properties ran all along the St. Joseph's River. Henry had plans to form an all-Catholic community that he referred to as St. Joseph's. But he wasn't the most honest of men, and this whole Catholic community thing was really all a guise to get people to come and live in this new town with the hopes of it being a more godly place than many of the other communities that had begun springing up in the area at the time. So he was like, come live in St. Joseph's. It's an all-Catholic community, and while he didn't really care about the Catholicism, he was hoping that it would bring a better quality of people, I guess. And of course, and as always, he was in it for the money too. So Henry built homes and some other necessary buildings and then sat back and watched all of the suckers come rolling in droves. It was nothing more to him really than a get-rich-quick scheme. Regardless of all the things he planned on building there though, it seems fate intervened on his greedy ass, and before he could build more than just a few more structures and buildings, a fire ripped through the area. It devastated not only the brand new buildings, but the land itself, and good old Henry ended up losing everything in the end. You see, guys, it wasn't only a fire that took out the land, but yellow fever also tore through the area and took out a lot of the population at the exact same time. It was an epidemic of almost biblical proportions, and in an otherwise mosquito-infested swampland, it didn't bode well for old Henry or anyone else thinking they could just sweep in and easily build up communities on the stolen and ill-gotten, blood-soaked land. Many people who died of the yellow fever epidemic were just buried either on the property where they lived or somewhere near it in the surrounding woods. I just want to take a moment to say, as someone who knows a lot about these things, this is never Never a good idea. Cemeteries serve a greater purpose in keeping the beloved dead on hallowed ground and not setting the sometimes angry and aggressive spirits out among the community to wreak their own havoc. But moving on. By 1887, so only a decade after he had first started helping settle what he called St. Joseph's, the town was all but abandoned and everyone had either died or moved on. Henry Sanford went on to success with his next populous endeavor when he founded and helped populate the nearby town of Sanford, Florida, which is still called by that name today. At around the turn of the century, St. Joseph's would be renamed Lake Monroe for all intents and purposes, but everyone who had been there or who lived around there knew that it was St. Joseph's, and they all thought, even at that time, that something was wrong with the land itself. What I mean to say is the surrounding area that was named this, and it swelled to the point where it basically swallowed the entire community that was once St. Joseph. So it was much, much bigger than St. Joseph's, and St. Joseph's was kind of just swallowed up by it and included in it. The dark history of the original town is said to have remained, though, and Lake Monroe was considered by some to have been cursed from its inception. In 1905, a settler named Albert Hawkins bought some land in the area where, during the epidemic, the original family that had settled there had been taken out one by the yellow fever. As he walked along his newly purchased land one day, he came across overgrown burial plots that belonged to the members of the original family who had died and then been buried on their own land, which was now his. In a move that is surprisingly respectful for someone living in that particular time period, Albert decided against having the bodies and plots removed and cleaned them up a little bit. He didn't mind sharing his property with the graves and decayed, probably skeletal bodies of the previous occupants, and he even spruced the area up where they were laid for their eternal rest, at least a little bit. He was trying to be respectful. He didn't believe in moving gravestones or moving bodies, and he even thought to put little flowers and crosses and stuff. He completed this little cemetery and memorial to the deceased with a little fence he built to keep the area separate from the rest of the land, probably so that people wouldn't trample on it. Well, as separate as dead and decaying bodies could be when kept that way only by a makeshift fence, but at least he was trying, right? He made sure to tell everyone to stay away from it and really did seem to make an effort in maintaining the dignity of the previous family. However, according to the legend, and possibly to Hawkins himself, these graves were said to hold some sort of dark energy that soon pervaded and then eventually someone overtook the land itself, as well as the land and all of the surrounding communities. This, ladies and gentlemen, is said to be the start of it all, depending on who you ask. It did not take long after he cleaned up the graves and area around them after he built his little shrine for his neighbors to complain about seeing strange lights roaming around near the area of the graves in the middle of the night. They also informed him that objects in their homes moved on their own and quote-unquote ghostly noises would pervade their homes when they were trying to sleep, and honestly at any and all other hours of the day or night. In essence, they believed the ghosts of the family that were buried on his property were now haunting their homes. They were pissed. They were like, why didn't you just have the bodies removed like any normal person and desecrate and disrespect their burial mounds? They're dead anyway. Now they're haunting us. Makes total sense. Totally. Remember, it's thought that they had no idea how many bodies were callously and haphazardly thrown and half buried in the woods and swamps surrounding their homes. They didn't even know this. Therefore, they chalked it all up to the one family who had previously lived on, died, and then been buried on Hawkins' property. They thought that somehow his respect toward the deceased and their final resting places had somehow angered them. Somehow, I guess. People started to come forward more and more each day who claimed that the graves were cursed and therefore revenge was allegedly being sought on the entire community. One neighbor in particular is said to have ripped down the fence containing the graves, and later that day his house is said to have been struck by lightning. I know this means nothing to us now because our homes aren't powder kegs waiting for a spark in order to explode, but back then that's exactly what they were, and the lightning strike is said to have razed the entire home and a few surrounding buildings to the ground by way of a very mysteriously contained fire. It should have spread everywhere because of how the land was. The fire only seemed to affect this one particular neighbor's home and property. In another incident that's said to have happened in the 1950s, one of Hawkins' grandsons was playing at the grave sites and kicked over one of the wooden crosses that were being used to mark each individual body. He's said to have been killed the very next day in a car accident. When he tried to replace the rotten, old, and worn wooden crosses with nice new ones, Hawkins himself is said to have had his own home catch fire as well. He took that as a warning to just leave the graves and markers as they were, and he should get credit because he at least understood a little bit of what was going on and tried to warn people to follow his example in leaving the site alone. All of these things having happened near those makeshift graves earned it the nickname the Field of Death, and the locals as well as his neighbors refused to go anywhere near both the site or the Hawkinsons' home itself. They didn't even have visitors anymore. Despite this and many other allegations of hauntings in the area, Florida's population surge continued, and because of that, there were highways being built left and right. Tourism was booming, and that's another reason for all of the new buildings and roadways that just kept popping up everywhere. They needed to keep up with the demands of all of the travelers passing through as well. The development could be called nothing other than rampant, and one of the proposed highways was Interstate 4, I-4, which was meant to connect Tampa to Daytona Beach. While this was a great idea and seemed very efficient in theory, there was the little fact that this highway, for one reason or another, was planned in such a way that it would be built right over and throughout the so-called Field of Death. That's right, they were planning on building over the grave sites on Hawkins' property. Hawkins really couldn't do much about it, though his family did try. No one who was a part of the building of the highways cared at all about a bunch of random old graves that were in the way of their profit. Hawkins died in 1939, and though his widow took up his fight to keep the highway off their land and away from these graves specifically, she failed in her attempts to protect it. In fact, she had sold the land back when she was in need of money at some point after her husband had died, and the part in question was then considered eminent domain, and therefore she had no say in the matter at all. Not that anyone really believes she would have had a say in anything one way or another. Like, even if she didn't sell the land back, if it didn't belong to the state or the government or whoever, they would have just built it anyway. That's just how things were back then. In one last-ditch effort to preserve the integrity of the family of graves, she appealed to whoever was in charge that they at the very least remove the graves from the area and properly relocate them. Her pleas and appeals fell on deaf ears, and construction began in earnest. The officials in charge promised her that they would relocate them before construction of the highway, but of course, nobody ever cared enough to follow through. Construction commenced in 1960, and the highway was built right over the long-forgotten remains of the anonymous family buried there. Obviously, this was a very bad idea, and the consequences in the form of tragedy striking the highway and those building it was almost immediate. First, there was Hurricane Donna, which ripped all throughout and all across Florida at the exact time that construction for the I-4 was starting. What was odd about this seemingly innocuous, normal hurricane, though, was the fact that it literally turned itself around, put itself off course, and seemed to purposely tear through the exact spot where the graves had been before the initial start of the construction of the highway project. Meteorologists at the time insisted that Donna was only meant to pass by harmlessly and unceremoniously the coast of the state, and that it shouldn't have caused much, if any, damage at all to any of the residents inside of the cities. However, the hurricane seemed to have made a very sharp turn, which put it directly on the path of not only the construction site, but the graves below. Whether or not this was just a coincidence is up for debate, and as always, let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. Just remember to be respectful of yourself and others as you do so. Anyway, Donna ended up being the worst hurricane the state of Florida had ever seen and stalled the construction of the Interstate 4 for months on end afterwards. Almost immediately upon the highway being finished, it gained a sinister and somewhat evil reputation. First, a truck lost control and crashed right next to where the graves had been built over. This happened on the first day that the I-4 was open and operating sometime in 1963. The lives of numerous people were lost due to this accident, and it didn't take long for those who knew about the lost and trampled over, completely ignored final resting places where the graves and their markers once stood to make the connection. This was only the beginning of ongoing sinister phenomenon that seems to have happened in this one area of highway that stretches all throughout the state. The location where the graves were, which was quickly christened by the locals as the Dead Zone, is today known as the little area right at the banks of the St. Johns River at the Interstate Bridge overpass. I think I referred to that as the St. Joseph's River earlier. Sorry about that. The most notorious of the strange and nefarious, oftentimes deadly phenomena that happens in this area is the astronomically high number of traffic accidents that happen there all the time. There have been between 1,500 and 2,000 traffic accidents in this one little area of highway, which is but a mere quarter of a mile long. Now the highway itself is much longer, but this one dead zone area is only a quarter of a mile. Since the opening of the highway back almost 60 years ago, that's how many accidents have occurred there. While it may not sound like much over the course of 60 years, it actually is an inordinately high number of traffic accidents for such a small area and far outweighs, at least statistically, anywhere else in the United States as far as quarter-mile stretches of highway go. The Florida State Highway Department reported 44 accidents alone from 1995 to 1996 just in the dead zone area. And from 1999 to 2006, so in just 7 years, this quarter-mile stretch near the graves boasted a total of 440 accidents as well. Most of those accidents, according to both sets of statistics, were fatal for the people involved in them. In fact, the rate of accidents in the dead zone of I-4 is so well known and so incredibly intense that many Floridians refuse to drive in the area under any and all circumstances. They're said to go to great lengths and far out of their way in order to avoid coming into contact with that particular tiny stretch of road. Of course, the skeptics and the politicians tend to try to explain all of this away by saying that it's simply the result of too much traffic in such a small area all at one time. Basically, that there's bound to be accidents with that many cars on the road all at once. I don't know, guys. It seems like the numbers are impossibly high, and knowing what I do about the dead and how they work, more than likely, this is no coincidence. I don't only attribute it to the graves that Hawkins tried desperately to respect and protect, though. You have to keep in mind all of the people that were just flung around the woods when they died of yellow fever, when they were just passing through and didn't have homes and places to be buried on their land. They weren't residents, and anyone who didn't live there but who died there as a result of either the pandemic or whatever else were disposed of in that same way. Also, Hawkins's property wasn't the only one in the area that had graves of the families of the people who died buried in their yards. He just happened to be the only one who tried to show a modicum of respect and give at least some integrity to the deceased. He paid for it too, and now so do the people who drive that road. People who have driven the road have come forward and claimed that something seemed to have taken over the control of their vehicle and tried to purposely cause them to crash. Their cars didn't work properly while they drove that little stretch of highway, and a lot of the people who survived accident there have attested to this same thing as well. With everything we've learned about this area and with what we know in the community as a whole already about the desecration of graves, what can we presume about what's happening here? I mean, there's plenty of places throughout the world where graves have been gone over in order to build one thing or another, but I think that for a possible number of reasons, there seems to be some places where there's more activity, maybe more vengeance sought than others. I definitely believe that this place is a hotspot of paranormal activity and that it's more than likely had some very bad energy surrounding and all throughout it, but I'm not sure why aside from the graves. Oh yeah, the Indians. Probably the bloodshed of the natives. Native Americans, when they were pushed off land back then, they liked to curse the land. I see it all the time. I've seen it many times. It's unlikely, in my opinion, that the gravestones are the main reason, and I do believe it was more likely a curse that was placed on the land by the Native Americans who were murdered and displaced from their homes. With, of course, their homes being the aforementioned area around and throughout where the highway is, which also happens to be where the graves are located. Perhaps, and this is purely speculation on my part, Hawkins paying of all that attention to the graves and trying to do something good about a tragic and sad situation maybe opened something up around there, and a vortex or portal to the realm of the unhappy and vengeful dead was opened and remains that way today. There's more than just a crazy number of traffic accidents happening in this area though, and some of these things cannot be chalked up to something as simple as too high rate of traffic. Take, for instance, the tornadoes that rip through this area constantly. They all seem to follow the path of Interstate 4, almost as though the tornadoes are, for whatever reason, somehow attracted to it. There was, too, another strange and oddly behaved hurricane that tore through it as well. In 2004, Hurricane Charlie, just like Donna before it, seemed to be on a purposely charted path right towards and then directly over the entire interstate. Charlie Carson, who is a researcher and the author of the book Strange Florida, said of his namesake hurricane, quote, "Charlie followed almost the same route as Donna. They referred to Charlie as the I-4 hurricane. Strangely enough, there was construction going on around those graves. The land where the graves are was being disturbed again. It was almost like an exact repeat of Donna," end quote. Besides traffic accidents and natural disaster phenomena, there's actually more. Radios, cell phones, and even CB radios all seem to go dead in the dead zone area of the highway. If they do work, they will only pick up EVP-like sounds and ghostly voices, most of which are said to sound highly demonic. Most commonly reported, aside from the evil EVPs, is the sound of children's laughter that's constantly reported in this little stretch of highway. There are questioning disembodied voices that speak throughout the vehicles in the people's ears. Why? Who's there? And where am I? Guys, just imagine this for a minute, if you will. You're driving down this little stretch of highway that more than likely you know is allegedly haunted or something like that, and you start hearing EVPs coming out of your cell phone and the car radio. Once you're scared half to death as it is, there are disembodied questions blowing through your car that's accompanied by the sound of many children laughing. I'm not sure if it's joyous laughter, but if I were a betting woman, I would bet that it's not, and that more than likely it's laughter of the creepy and somewhat sinister kind. Sure, on the face of this, it all seems pretty benign, but when you really think about it, especially in the context that all of the tragedy that occurred there, along with the desecration of innumerable gravestones and random burial sites on top of probable Native American curses, and it's actually quite terrifying to think about, let alone experience it firsthand. Any gemstones from Florida here? Do any of you guys have any knowledge or firsthand accounts or experiences of and on this little dead zone? Email me and let me know. That information will be given at the end of the video, and it's always in the description box. The immediate area has no cell phone or radio antennas and no microwave emitters, so you tell me what we have here. Random nonsense that's all in people's heads in a big old coincidence based on nothing more than mere urban legends, or do we possibly have a cursed stretch of highway based on the actual history of the area and the consequences that come along with many of the things that were done here to people who long ago passed on from this human life? It's kind of a no-brainer in my opinion, but I don't believe in coincidence either. Ghost-like sightings of random shadow people, thick fogs that randomly appear out of nowhere, cold spots inside of your car that come on suddenly despite having the heat on inside of the vehicle, phantom hitchhikers, phantom and ghostly vehicles, and so much more phenomenon have been reported again and again by people who have driven on or who regularly drive on this little stretch of Interstate 4. In the dead zone in particular, but the phenomenon does spread out a little bit more than that. Take also the death and tragedy that seem to cling to the area like a sick and troublesome skin, and I believe we are well beyond any sort of reasonable explanation. That's all I have today for you guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you want to help me out, and if you just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video. Please check out my 3 live streams every other Monday at noon Eastern time. It's myself and Ghost Dragon ZW. We try to bring someone on to talk about paranormal extraterrestrial experiences. Wednesday nights from 7:15, 7:30-ish p.m. Eastern time until we run out of people to read for. It's also myself and Ghost Dragon ZW where I pull one random oracle card and give you a free reading for the week. Donations always welcome. And Thursday nights, it's myself, Ghost Dragon ZW, and Miss Paranormal Pixie. We usually go over spiritual stuff, but we also have people come on and talk about their personal encounters as well. And that starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time and goes from anywhere from 9 to 10. Depends on the time that we're having, really, and how the chat is doing in there. Come on in, check us out, hang out, become a gemstone, part of the family. Share out if you know anyone that would like the content. I'm really trying to do things to make the pre-recorded videos better. I'm doing the best that I can. Links to all 3 of my books on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback: Missing the Faith Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and my newest book, Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond. All available, paperback and Kindle, on Amazon. Links in the description box. If you want an autographed copy, if you want a personal reading, if you want to make a purchase of a manifestation intention spray, spiritual helper box, one-on-one video reading, one-on-one video spirituality session, whatever the case may be, any questions, concerns, comments, whatever, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Please consider donating to the channel. I've got PayPal, Cash App. You can become a patron. If you join my Patreon for $20 a month or more, you will receive a personal intuitive oracle reading every single month that you make the donation, free of charge, as a gift for me to say thank you. Also, my Amazon wish list gift link, there are crystals, there's oracle decks. Mostly it's stuff for the Wednesday night stream and spirituality stuff. Kind of help grow my business, help me to help you, or if you just want to send me a gift and say hey, howdy, hi. Donations always really greatly appreciated. Also, consider leaving a positive comment and really hitting the like button on the video. Not just liking it, but hitting the like button means the absolute world to me, guys. I really need to get the likes to match the views a little bit better. With all of that being said, and I know I'm forgetting so many different things, please be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Always be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you can do it, you can manifest your dreams, you can accomplish anything. You are perfect just the way you are. I totally and definitely believe in you. Hit me up on email, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Leave a positive comment, hit the like button, all of those wonderful things. Pick up my books. If you want autographed copies, hit me up. Anything that you need, I'm here for you, all right? Remember to always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.